Have you ever found yourself drained, confused, or hurt by someone's actions, wondering why their presence unsettles your peace? I've been there too. Life is full of people who cross our paths, and not all of them carry good intentions. Some might act with malice, others with indifference, and it can be hard to see the truth behind their smiles or words. In Buddhism, we are taught to walk with clarity and compassion, but also with discernment. Being kind does not mean being blind. It's about understanding the nature of those around us and making choices that protect our well-being and foster harmony. Because here's the truth. Peace isn't something we find only in meditation. It's something we cultivate in every interaction, every relationship. As I've learned, the energy we allow into our lives shapes the paths we walk. And sometimes, the greatest act of wisdom is recognizing when someone is not good for us and letting go, not with anger, but with awareness. Years ago, I worked closely with someone who seemed helpful on the surface. They were charming, always knew what to say, and appeared to care. But over time, I began noticing cracks in their behavior, subtle manipulations, moments of cruelty disguised as jokes, and an odd satisfaction they seemed to get from others' struggles. At first, I thought I was overthinking. After all, wasn't it my duty to be patient and understanding? Buddhism teaches us compassion, doesn't it? But then I remembered, compassion isn't about tolerating harm. It's about acting in a way that protects our own peace and the balance of the world around us. When I stepped back and saw things clearly, I realized this person was pulling me into a web of negativity and confusion. It wasn't my job to fix them or endure their actions. My path required me to act with wisdom, not attachment. So I took a step back, practiced kindness from a distance, and refocused on those who brought goodness and growth into my life. That experience taught me that identifying harmful people is not an act of judgment, but an act of clarity. Buddhism teaches us to see things as they are. We cannot force someone to change, but we can choose how we respond, who we walk alongside, and where we invest our energy. As I share these lessons, remember this: protecting your peace isn't selfish. It's a gift to yourself and to the world, because a calm and grounded mind radiates light far beyond what you can see. Let's uncover these signs together, not to judge, but to understand and protect what truly matters: our peace, our purpose, and our journey. 1. Disloyalty. Let me start by saying this. Loyalty is one of the rarest and most precious gifts someone can give. When you have people in your life who stand by you, honor their word, and respect your trust, they are treasures worth cherishing. But I've learned that not everyone values loyalty the same way, and when disloyalty shows up in our lives, it can shake us to the core. I remember a time when I placed my trust in someone I considered a close friend. At first, everything seemed perfect. They were supportive, always there when I needed them, and we shared countless laughs and deep conversations. But as time went on, small cracks began to appear. I'd hear whispers of things they said behind my back, subtle undermining of my efforts, and even instances where they put their own interests above the promises they made to me. At first, I brushed it off. Maybe I'm imagining it, I told myself. No one is perfect. But then, one day, they did something that shattered the foundation of our friendship. It wasn't a small mistake or a moment of forgetfulness. It was a deliberate act of betrayal, an act that made me realize their loyalty had never been with me, but with their own convenience. In Buddhism, loyalty isn't just about staying true to others. It's about staying true to our values and intentions. It's about being someone others can rely on without fear of deceit. Disloyalty, on the other hand, is a sign of imbalance. Someone who hasn't cultivated mindfulness or respect for the connections they've built. When we encounter disloyalty, it hurts. It cuts deep because it breaks the trust that forms the foundation of relationships. But here's the wisdom I've gained. Disloyalty isn't about you. It's a reflection of the other person's state of mind, their struggles, and their inability to honor what is sacred. It's never your fault when someone chooses disloyalty. So, what do we do when we face disloyalty? First, we must recognize it for what it is. Disloyalty often hides behind excuses, half-truths, and manipulation. It can make us doubt our own judgment, but deep down, the heart always knows. Listen to that inner knowing. If someone repeatedly betrays your trust, undermines you, or acts in ways that harm your peace, it's a sign they are not walking the same path as you. Second, we let go, not with anger, but with understanding. Buddhism teaches us the beauty of non-attachment. Holding on to anger or resentment only chains us to the pain of disloyalty. Instead, we can release it by accepting that this person is on their own journey, with their own challenges to face. Finally, we recommit to loyalty in our own lives. I've found that when others betray us, it's a chance to double down on our own integrity. Be the person who honors their word, who stays true even when it's inconvenient, and who values the trust of others as sacred. In doing so, you attract people who share these values and create a circle of trust and mutual respect. Disloyalty will always hurt. It's a wound that takes time to heal, but it's also a teacher, showing us who we can truly count on and guiding us to cultivate deeper wisdom and compassion. 2. Lack of integrity. Integrity is the cornerstone of a meaningful life. Without it, our actions, words, and intentions fall apart like a house with no foundation. I've seen this truth play out in my own life, especially when I've encountered people who lack integrity. There was a time when I worked with someone who seemed incredibly charming. They said all the right things, presented themselves as trustworthy, and gave the impression of being deeply committed to shared goals. But over time, I began noticing inconsistencies in their behavior. They'd promise one thing and do another. They'd twist the truth to suit their needs, often at the expense of others. At first, I tried to rationalize it. Everyone slips up, I thought. But these weren't small slips. They were patterns, deliberate choices to sacrifice integrity for convenience or personal gain. The moment that opened my eyes was when their actions directly impacted a project we were working on. They cut corners, lied about their progress, and shifted blame when things went wrong. It became clear that they weren't just struggling with integrity, they had chosen to abandon it altogether. In Buddhism, integrity is more than just doing the right thing. It's living in alignment with your values, ensuring your thoughts, words, and actions reflect the same truth. When someone lacks integrity, they create chaos, not just for themselves, but for everyone around them. The absence of integrity is like a stone in a river. It disrupts the natural flow of trust and harmony, creating ripples that can lead to confusion, mistrust, and conflict. And yet we must remember, a lack of integrity in others is not our burden to bear. It's a reflection of their struggles, their disconnection from mindfulness, and their inability to live with authenticity. When I encountered this person, I had a choice to make. I could either confront their behavior head-on or quietly distance myself. I chose the latter, not out of avoidance, but out of a commitment to my own peace. Buddhism teaches us the importance of right action, acting in ways that uphold harmony and virtue. Engaging with someone who lacks integrity often leads to unnecessary conflict, and I chose instead to focus on building connections with people who shared my values. So, how do we navigate a world where integrity isn't always a given? First, we must cultivate it within ourselves. Integrity starts with mindfulness, being fully present in our actions and ensuring they align with our intentions. When we live with integrity, we become a source of stability and trust for others. Second, we set boundaries. When someone repeatedly demonstrates a lack of integrity, it's not our job to fix them. Our role is to protect our peace and ensure their actions don't disrupt our own journey. Finally, we practice compassion. As frustrating as it is to deal with someone who lacks integrity, we must remember that they too are on a path of learning. Their struggles are a reflection of their inner battles, not a statement about us. The absence of integrity is a challenge we will all face, but it's also a call to deepen our own practice of truthfulness and alignment. By staying true to our values, we not only protect ourselves but also inspire others to rise to the same standard. 3. Lack of self-control. Self-control is one of the most underestimated yet powerful qualities we can cultivate in life. It's the difference between reacting impulsively and responding mindfully, between creating chaos and fostering peace. And yet, I've encountered many people who lack this quality, and I'll be honest, their presence can be unsettling, even harmful. Years ago, I worked with someone who seemed incapable of reining in their impulses. If they were angry, they exploded. If they were upset, everyone around them felt the storm. Their lack of control wasn't limited to emotions. It extended to their decisions, actions, and even how they treated others. At first, I tried to be understanding. Maybe they're just stressed, I thought. But over time, their behavior became a pattern, one that drained the energy of everyone around them. Buddhism teaches us that the mind is like a wild elephant. Without training, it stomps through life, causing destruction and suffering. But with mindfulness and practice, we can tame that elephant, guiding it gently toward peace and wisdom. Those who lack self-control have not yet begun this training. They are at the mercy of their own untamed minds. What's dangerous about a lack of self-control is its unpredictability. When someone cannot regulate their emotions or impulses, you never know when their storm will break. It creates an environment of tension and instability, where even small conflicts can escalate into large, unnecessary dramas. But here's what I've learned. We cannot control someone else's lack of self-control, but we can control how we respond to it. The first step is to recognize the signs. A person without self-control often acts on impulse, speaks without thinking, and allows their emotions to dictate their actions. This is not a reflection of your worth or your actions. It is a reflection of their internal struggles. The second step is setting boundaries. I used to think that patience meant tolerating everything, but Buddhism has taught me that patience is not passive. It is active and intentional. Setting boundaries with someone who lacks self-control is not about pushing them away. It's about protecting your peace and creating space for them to reflect on their behavior. Finally, we must practice compassion. It's easy to judge someone who lashes out or acts impulsively, but Buddhism reminds us that everyone is fighting their own battles. Their lack of control is often rooted in pain, fear, or unresolved issues. Compassion does not mean enabling their behavior, but it does mean responding with kindness instead of anger. I've also found that dealing with someone who lacks self-control is a powerful reminder to cultivate it in ourselves. When we encounter their chaos, we have an opportunity to practice mindfulness, patience, and calmness. We become the steady presence in the storm, a source of stability not only for ourselves, but for others. Self-control is not about suppressing emotions or desires. It's about mastering them. It's about pausing, breathing, and choosing the path of wisdom instead of the path of reaction. Those who lack this mastery may create challenges in our lives, but they also offer us a chance to grow. And in the end, every challenge is a teacher, guiding us toward deeper peace and understanding. 4. Destructive criticism. Let me ask you this. Have you ever been on the receiving end of criticism that felt more like an attack than an attempt to help? I have, and I know how deeply those words can cut. Criticism, when given constructively, can be a gift, but when it's destructive, it's a weapon, and one that can leave lasting scars. I remember working on a project that I poured my heart into. I was proud of the effort I had put in, but when I shared it with someone I trusted, their response wasn't what I expected. Instead of offering thoughtful feedback, they tore it apart. "This is all wrong," they said, their tone dripping with condescension. "You should have done it this way." There was no kindness, no intention to guide, only the desire to criticize for the sake of tearing me down. In Buddhism, speech is one of the most powerful tools we have. The Buddha taught us to use our words wisely with the intention of uplifting and healing, not harming. Destructive criticism, on the other hand, comes from a place of ego, insecurity, or even envy. It says more about the person delivering it than the person receiving it. When faced with destructive criticism, it's easy to internalize it, to let it shake your confidence. But here's what I've learned. Not all criticism deserves your attention. Some words are like arrows. They are meant to wound, but you have a choice. You can either let those arrows pierce your heart, or you can let them fall to the ground. So, how do we deal with destructive criticism? The first step is to pause and reflect. Ask yourself, is there any truth in what was said? If there is, take it as an opportunity to grow. But if the criticism is baseless or delivered with malice, recognize it for what it is, a reflection of the other person's state of mind. The second step is to protect your peace. When someone constantly criticizes you destructively, it's okay to distance yourself. Buddhism teaches us to let go of what doesn't serve us, and that includes relationships that bring negativity into our lives. Finally, we must respond with grace. This doesn't mean accepting the criticism or pretending it didn't hurt. It means choosing not to retaliate. As the Buddha said, hatred is never appeased by hatred. Responding to destructive criticism with anger only fuels the cycle. Instead, respond with calmness, and if necessary, silence. One of the greatest lessons I've learned is that destructive criticism often comes from a place of pain. The person delivering it may be struggling with their own insecurities or frustrations. While this doesn't excuse their behavior, it helps us see them with compassion instead of resentment. At the same time, we must commit to using our own words wisely. Let us be the kind of people who offer constructive feedback, who build others up instead of tearing them down. When we speak, let it be with kindness, clarity, and the intention to help, not harm. Destructive criticism is a test of our inner strength. It challenges us to stay grounded in our self-worth, to filter out negativity, and to respond with wisdom. It's not easy, but with practice it becomes a powerful tool for growth, not just for ourselves, but for those around us. 5. Selfishness. Selfishness is a tricky thing to deal with, isn't it? On the surface, it's easy to see when someone is acting out of self-interest. They take more than they give, prioritize their needs above everyone else's, and rarely, if ever, consider how their actions affect others. But selfishness goes deeper than just behavior. It's a mindset that creates imbalance and disharmony in relationships. I've had my fair share of experiences with selfish people. There was a time when someone close to me consistently asked for favors, but was never there when I needed help. At first, I justified it. Maybe they're busy, I thought. They'll come around when it's my turn. But they didn't. The more I gave, the more they took. And when I finally said no, their response wasn't gratitude for all I'd done, it was resentment. Buddhism teaches us that selfishness arises from attachment. attachment to desires, possessions, and the ego's need to feel superior or fulfilled. When someone is selfish, it's often because they see the world as a place of scarcity, where they must take as much as they can to protect themselves. They haven't yet realized the abundance that comes from generosity and connection. But selfishness isn't just about how others behave. It's also a mirror for us. I've learned that when I feel resentment towards someone's selfishness, it's often because I've overextended myself. Buddhism reminds us to maintain balance, to give with a pure heart, but also to protect our own energy and well-being. So, how do we deal with selfishness? First, we must recognize it. When someone consistently prioritizes their needs over yours without consideration, it's a sign that their mindset is rooted in selfishness. This recognition isn't about judgment, it's about clarity. Second, we set boundaries. I used to think that saying no was selfish, but Buddhism has taught me that true generosity comes from a place of strength, not depletion. When you give without boundaries, you're not helping others, you're hurting yourself. Boundaries are an act of self-respect and a way to encourage others to grow. Third, we practice compassion. Selfish people are often trapped in a cycle of fear and attachment. They take because they believe they lack. While this doesn't excuse their behavior, it helps us approach them with understanding instead of anger. Sometimes, a gentle conversation can open their eyes to the impact of their actions. Finally, we must examine our own hearts. Are we giving with expectation? Are we holding on to resentment when others don't reciprocate? Buddhism teaches us to give freely, without attachment to the outcome. When we release our expectations, we find peace, even in the face of selfishness. Selfishness can drain you if you let it, but it can also be a teacher. It shows us where our boundaries need strengthening, where our compassion can grow, and where we can let go of expectations that don't serve us. In this way, even the most challenging relationships become opportunities for growth. 6. Arrogance. Arrogance is one of the most off-putting traits we can encounter in others. It's that air of superiority, the dismissal of other perspectives, and the constant need to prove oneself right. If you've ever dealt with an arrogant person, you know how draining it can be. Their need to dominate conversations and belittle others can create tension in any environment. I remember once working with someone who always had to have the last word. No matter what the topic was, they positioned themselves as the authority. If you shared an idea, they'd counter it with something better. If you achieved something, they'd downplay it. At first, I felt frustrated and even hurt. I wanted to prove myself to them, to make them see my worth. But then I realized something important. Their arrogance wasn't about me. It was about them. Buddhism teaches us that arrogance stems from ignorance, specifically ignorance of interconnectedness. An arrogant person sees themselves as separate, better, or more important than others. They fail to recognize that we are all part of a larger whole, each contributing in our own unique way. Their arrogance is a defense mechanism, a way to mask their insecurities or fears. When I began to see this, my frustration turned to compassion. I stopped trying to prove myself to this person and instead focused on staying grounded in my own values. Buddhism encourages us to respond to arrogance with humility, not false humility, but the kind that comes from a deep understanding of our shared humanity. So how do we deal with arrogance? First, we must not take it personally. An arrogant person's behavior is a reflection of their inner struggles, not your worth. When we stop reacting to their need for superiority, we take away their power to unsettle us. Second, we maintain our humility. Humility doesn't mean lowering ourselves or shrinking to make others comfortable. It means staying grounded in our truth, listening openly, and valuing the perspectives of others, even when they differ from our own. Third, we practice patience. Dealing with arrogance can test your patience, but it's also an opportunity to strengthen it. Instead of engaging in arguments or trying to prove a point, we can choose to stay calm and composed. This doesn't mean tolerating disrespect. It means responding with wisdom. Finally, we reflect on our own tendencies. If we're honest, we've all had moments of arrogance. Buddhism encourages us to look inward and ask, am I acting with humility and openness? Am I valuing others as much as I value myself? By cultivating these qualities in ourselves, we not only grow, but also inspire others to do the same. Arrogance is a barrier to connection, both for the person who embodies it and for those around them. But it's also a reminder of the importance of humility, compassion, and patience. When we encounter arrogance, we have a choice to react with frustration or to respond with understanding. And in that choice lies our freedom. 7. Cruelty. Cruelty is one of the most painful traits to encounter in another person. It's not just unkindness, it's an intentional desire to harm or belittle, often masked as a joke, a subtle action, or even indifference. Cruelty strikes at the core of our humanity, making us question why someone would take pleasure in another's pain. I've faced cruelty before, and I know how deeply it can wound. There was a time when someone I thought was a friend began using my vulnerabilities against me. They didn't just point out my flaws, they highlighted them in front of others, using my struggles as a source of entertainment. At first, I brushed it off, thinking, they don't mean it. Maybe it's their way of teasing. But as the pattern continued, I realized this wasn't innocent. It was calculated, deliberate, and meant to hurt. In Buddhism, cruelty is seen as a manifestation of ignorance and suffering. A person who is cruel is often disconnected from their own compassion, consumed by their pain or insecurities. They lash out at others to feel a fleeting sense of power or control. While their actions are harmful, understanding this can help us respond with wisdom rather than anger. When faced with cruelty, the first step is to protect your peace. Buddhism teaches us to practice non-attachment, not just to material things, but to the actions and words of others. Cruelty hurts when we internalize it, when we let it shake our sense of self-worth. But the truth is, someone's cruelty says more about them than it does about you. You are not defined by their actions. The second step is setting boundaries. If someone consistently acts with cruelty, it's okay to walk away. Compassion doesn't mean tolerating harm. It means understanding someone's pain without letting it become your own. Protecting your peace is an act of self-compassion, and it's a way of breaking the cycle of cruelty. Finally, we respond with kindness, not as a way of excusing their behavior, but as a way of maintaining our own integrity. As the Buddha taught, hatred does not cease by hatred. Hatred ceases only by love. When we respond to cruelty with calmness and compassion, we not only protect our peace, but also set an example for others. Cruelty is a harsh reality of life, but it's also a reminder of the importance of cultivating compassion for ourselves and others. When we encounter it, we have a choice, to let it harden us or to let it deepen our practice of kindness, and in that choice lies our freedom. 8. Envy. Envy is one of the most insidious emotions we encounter, both in ourselves and others. It's that gnawing feeling of dissatisfaction, the belief that someone else's success or happiness diminishes our own. I've seen how envy can poison relationships, create unnecessary competition, and lead to actions that harm both the envious person and their target. I remember a time when someone I knew began subtly sabotaging my efforts. They didn't celebrate my successes. Instead, they questioned them, downplayed them, or tried to take credit for them. At first I couldn't understand why, but then it became clear. Envy had taken root. Their dissatisfaction with their own life had turned my achievements into a source of pain for them. In Buddhism, envy is considered one of the three poisons, alongside greed and hatred. It arises from attachment to the idea that happiness is scarce, that someone else's gain means our loss. But Buddhism also teaches us the antidote, mudita, or sympathetic joy. When we learn to celebrate the happiness and success of others, we free ourselves from the chains of envy. Dealing with envy from others requires patience and clarity. First, we must recognize that their envy is not about us. It's about their own struggles and insecurities. When someone envies you, it's often because they feel lacking in their own life. This understanding can help us respond with compassion rather than defensiveness. Second, we set boundaries. If someone's envy turns into toxic behavior, such as sabotage, gossip, or manipulation, it's essential to protect ourselves. Buddhism teaches us to let go of what doesn't serve us, and that includes relationships that bring negativity into our lives. Finally, we use the experience as an opportunity for growth. Reflect on how you respond to others' successes. Do you feel joy for them, or do you compare yourself? Practicing mudita starts with mindfulness, noticing when envy arises and gently redirecting it toward gratitude and celebration. Envy, whether it comes from others or arises within us, is a teacher. It shows us where we are attached, where we feel lacking, and where we can grow. By cultivating joy for others and focusing on our own path, we transform envy into an opportunity for connection and peace. In the end, envy and cruelty both challenge us to rise above negativity. They remind us of the importance of compassion, not just for others but for ourselves. Through mindfulness, boundaries, and kindness, we can navigate these challenges with wisdom and grace. 9. Hypocrisy. Hypocrisy is one of those traits that can easily disrupt trust and create confusion in relationships. It's when someone's actions don't align with their words, when they hold others to standards they themselves refuse to follow. Encountering hypocrisy can feel like walking on unstable ground. Nothing feels consistent, and you're left questioning what's real. I remember working with someone who constantly preached the importance of teamwork and honesty. They'd give long speeches about integrity and how it was the foundation of any meaningful collaboration. Yet behind the scenes, they were anything but honest. They'd manipulate situations to their advantage, take credit for others' work, and dismiss people's efforts when it didn't serve their agenda. The dissonance between their words and actions was impossible to ignore. Buddhism teaches us that living authentically, aligning our thoughts, words, and deeds, is essential to a life of peace and virtue. Hypocrisy, on the other hand, stems from a disconnection within. When someone is hypocritical, they often project a version of themselves they want others to believe while hiding their true intentions or struggles. This lack of coherence is a reflection of inner conflict. When faced with hypocrisy, the first step is to observe without judgment. Hypocrisy often triggers frustration or anger because it feels like betrayal, but Buddhism reminds us to look deeper. The hypocrite's behavior isn't about you. It's about their inability to live in alignment with their own values. The second step is to maintain your own integrity. It's easy to feel disheartened or tempted to respond in kind when dealing with hypocrisy. But Buddhism teaches us to hold steadfast to our principles. As the Buddha said, "The wise person does not engage in the faults they criticize in others." Let the hypocrite's behavior be a reminder of the importance of living authentically. Third, set boundaries. If someone's hypocrisy is causing harm, it's okay to distance yourself. Protecting your peace isn't an act of rejection, it's an act of wisdom. Surround yourself with people who value honesty and coherence, and let go of relationships that disrupt your equilibrium. Lastly, use the experience as a mirror. Hypocrisy is a challenge to examine our own lives. Are there areas where we fail to live up to our own values? Buddhism encourages self-reflection, not as a means of self-criticism, but as a path to growth. When we address our own inconsistencies, we inspire others to do the same. Dealing with hypocrisy isn't easy, but it's an opportunity to practice patience, compassion, and mindfulness. By staying true to our values and understanding the struggles of others, we can navigate the instability of hypocrisy with grace and clarity. 10. Need to control. Control is something we all crave to some extent. It gives us a sense of security, a belief that we can shape outcomes and steer our lives in the direction we desire. But when this need for control becomes excessive, when someone seeks to dominate, manipulate, or impose their will on others, it becomes destructive. The need to control can suffocate relationships, stifle freedom, and create an atmosphere of tension and fear. I once knew someone who had to control everything. They wanted the final say in every decision, dictated how things should be done, and couldn't tolerate any deviation from their plans. At first, I thought they were just a perfectionist, but over time, it became clear that their need to control wasn't about achieving the best outcomes. It was about masking their own fears and insecurities. Their rigidity created conflict and resentment, and their relationships began to unravel. Buddhism teaches us to let go of attachment, including the attachment to control. The desire to control arises from fear, fear of uncertainty, fear of failure, fear of losing something we value. But life is inherently uncertain, and clinging to control only deepens our suffering. True peace comes from accepting what we cannot control and focusing on what we can, our own thoughts, actions, and responses. When dealing with someone who has a strong need to control, the first step is recognizing their behavior without judgment. Their actions, while frustrating, often come from a place of inner turmoil. They are fighting a battle within themselves, trying to impose order on a world they find chaotic. The second step is setting boundaries. A controlling person may try to dictate your choices or undermine your autonomy. Buddhism reminds us to practice self-respect and mindfulness. It's okay to assert your independence and make decisions that align with your values, even if it means challenging their control. Third, respond with compassion. While their behavior may be harmful, it often stems from fear or pain. By approaching them with kindness and understanding, you can create space for dialogue and growth. This doesn't mean excusing their behavior. It means acknowledging their humanity while protecting your peace. Finally, reflect on your own relationship with control. Are there areas where you cling too tightly, where you resist the natural flow of life? Buddhism teaches us the beauty of surrender, not as a sign of weakness, but as a recognition of life's impermanence and interconnectedness. When we let go of the need to control, we open ourselves to freedom, creativity, and deeper connections with others. The need to control is a challenge, both for those who exhibit it and for those who encounter it. But it's also an opportunity to practice patience, set boundaries, and deepen our understanding of attachment. By embracing these lessons, we not only protect our peace, but also inspire others to release their grip and live with greater ease and harmony. 11. Lack of empathy. Empathy is what connects us to the world around us. It's the ability to feel another's joy or pain, to understand without judgment, and to act with kindness toward others. When someone lacks empathy, it's as if a vital thread in the fabric of human connection is missing. Their indifference can leave you feeling invisible, unheard, or even devalued. If you've ever dealt with someone who shows no concern for the feelings of others, you know how isolating and frustrating it can be. I once had a colleague who seemed entirely void of empathy. If someone was struggling, their response was dismissive. That's not my problem. If someone achieved something great, their reaction was lukewarm or critical. In team discussions, they would bulldoze over others' ideas without a second thought. At first, I took it personally. I wondered if there was something wrong with me, if I had done something to deserve their indifference. But over time, I realized their lack of empathy wasn't about me at all. It was a reflection of their own disconnection. Buddhism teaches us that empathy, or karuna, compassion, is a cornerstone of a peaceful and virtuous life. A lack of empathy stems from ignorance of our shared humanity, our interdependence, and the natural flow of giving and receiving kindness. When someone lacks empathy, it's often because they are disconnected from their own emotions, numbed by their fears or wounds, or consumed by self-centeredness. Dealing with someone who lacks empathy can be deeply challenging. Their indifference can make you question your worth or wonder if compassion is even worth the effort. But here's the truth. Your empathy is a gift, and you don't need their validation to know its value. So how do we handle a lack of empathy in others? The first step is understanding. People who lack empathy are often carrying heavy burdens they may not even be aware of. Their inability to connect with others' emotions may stem from their own unresolved pain or insecurities. This doesn't excuse their behavior, but it can help you approach them with less frustration and more clarity. The second step is setting boundaries. Just because someone lacks empathy doesn't mean you have to accept their behavior. If their indifference is harming you or draining your energy, it's okay to limit your interactions with them. Protecting your emotional well-being is not selfish, it's necessary. The third step is practicing compassion, even when it feels difficult. Responding to a lack of empathy with anger or resentment only deepens the cycle of disconnection. Instead, approach the situation with kindness, not for their sake, but for your own. As the Buddha taught, holding on to anger is like grasping a hot coal with the intent of throwing it at someone else. You are the one who gets burned. Letting go of anger frees you to act from a place of peace. Finally, use the experience as an opportunity for growth. Reflect on your own capacity for empathy. Are there times when you've been less understanding or compassionate than you'd like to be? Use this reflection not as a source of guilt, but as a guide for becoming more present, patient, and open in your interactions. Lack of empathy, while painful to experience, is a reminder of the importance of staying connected to our own humanity. It's an opportunity to deepen our compassion, protect our peace, and practice the kind of kindness that transforms not just our own lives, but the lives of those around us. When we encounter someone who lacks empathy, we have a choice. We can let their indifference harden us, or we can let it inspire us to be even more compassionate and present. The path of empathy isn't always easy, but it is always worth it, for ourselves, for others, and for the world we are working to create. As we come to the end of this video, I hope you feel more empowered and enlightened on how to recognize and deal with those who may bring negativity or harm into your life. Remember, protecting your peace is a vital act of self-respect, and recognizing the signs of toxicity gives you the wisdom to live with more clarity and compassion. Now, I'd love to hear from you. Have you encountered any of these behaviors in your life? How did you handle them? Share your thoughts in the comments below. I'd love to read your experiences and learn from your insights. And if you found this video helpful, don't forget to hit the subscribe button for more wisdom on how to live a life of peace, mindfulness, and growth. Stay connected, stay mindful, and take care of your inner peace. See you in the next video.